Hi guys, this is Hannah from the Sweet Tooth Test Kitchen, and today we are going to make the world's easiest sourdough bread. Okay, so to make this bread, it's really just a few ingredients. We have our all-purpose flour. We're going to use 300 grams of this. Our sourdough starter, we're going to use 113 grams of that. This is our water, about 3/4 of a cup. 1 teaspoon of yeast and 1 teaspoon of salt. So the first thing that we're gonna do, and what I encourage everyone to do, is to measure everything out. So we'll put the grams for everything down in the bio, and get yourself a food scale if you don't already have one. This is gonna make sure that your bread turns out great every time. So first step is what I like to call cheating. We're gonna mix in our yeast and our water. And 1 teaspoon of yeast. So this is just going to make it so that our sourdough bread will be done today and not tomorrow. A true sourdough does not have any instant yeast in it, but I like to have my sourdough the same day that I make it. So I add a little bit of yeast. So the first thing we're gonna do is just whisk it up and let it sit for a few minutes. Now we're gonna let that sit. While you're letting this sit, I've already measured everything out except for the flour. This is usually when I measure out my sourdough starter. Don't forget to feed your starter so that you still have starter for next time. So I've already fed my starter. He's sitting out on the counter here so I can make something else out later tonight. And I have my 113 grams of starter already in this little dish. We're going to need 300 grams of flour. So I always kind of double measure just to make sure that the scale and the cups measure up. So 300 grams, this is going to be for 1 loaf of sourdough starter, or sorry, for sourdough bread. You can double up and make 2 loaves. I just, with quarantine, have been making a loaf basically every other day so that I always have fresh bread. But when we're not in quarantine, I usually make mine as 2 loaves and freeze 1 down, but there's no need for stale bread right now. All right, so we're going to 300 grams. All right, exactly 300, perfect. Get our salt out, 1 teaspoon of salt. So now we've got all of our ingredients measured out. We want to check in with our yeast. We can see some bubbling starting. So what this yeast is it's dehydrated and covered in a capsule. So when we put it in water, the capsule just dissolves, and then you get the activation of the yeast. The water, I usually try to keep it around 90 degrees. It's just a lukewarm, slightly warmer than room temperature, and I just take it out of the tap. And then save the yeast for later. You can use more or less yeast depending on how long you want to wait. So this is just going to affect your rise time. I use about a teaspoon. Sometimes I've been going a little bit lighter just because yeast is in short supply right now, and I want to make my packets go the longest way. Plus, it will just increase the rise time. So when it doubles in size, you move on to the next step. So, looks like we're pretty good. We got some good bubbles going in our yeast. So now we will add the rest of our ingredients. All right, so I'm gonna add in the flour. And our 113 grams of sourdough starter. Make sure to get all that starter out. Now, if you have a stand mixer, go ahead and hook that up, pop it in, grab your kneading paddle attachment, put that on, And start on the stir setting just to get the flour fully incorporated. And you'll see it kind of starting to form a shaggy dough as the flour incorporates into the water and yeast. And once it starts to incorporate a little bit more and you feel confident you're not gonna get flour everywhere, you can turn up the speed. And the dough will start to pull away from the sides of the bowl. And as the flour incorporates, it will form a more firm ball. I usually knead for about 7 minutes. If you're kneading by hand, you'll need to knead for closer to probably 14 or 15 minutes. Godspeed. The stand mixer definitely makes it easier. I'm not bragging to it. So as you can see, the dough is forming one solid unit now and separating from the sides of the bowl. This is good, that's what we want to see. And we'll let it go for 7 minutes. Just to get that gluten to develop. Alright, so now we've got this gluten developing in our dough ball. So we'll pull the paddle off, throw that away, and you can see we've got a nice uniform ball here, not sticking to the sides of the bowl. Go ahead, grab a dough scraper, and what you want to do is definitely spray whatever bowl you're going to let your dough proof in so that it doesn't stick to the bowl as it rises. Grab your dough scraper and get all of that doughy goodness, sorry, it's a little hard to do when it's not towards you, into your new bowl to let it proof. All right, next thing you're gonna wanna do is make sure that this dough stays really nice and moist while it's rising. So I wet a paper towel and then I squeeze it out just so it's damp. Turn it back out. And then you've got this damp, wet towel. Cover it so that your dough doesn't dry out. If you have a proofing drawer, you can put it in a proofing drawer now. Otherwise, put it in your oven off with the light on to allow it to proof, or I just put it in my toaster oven. Depending on how long you want it to take to proof, you can put it in different environments. So this is gonna be about a 4-hour proof, and we'll come back around lunchtime and shape our dough. If you want a longer proof, just leave it in a colder area, not the fridge unless you're gonna go overnight. And if you want a shorter proof, leave it in a warmer. You can turn your oven light on or turn the heat up in your proofing drawer. So that's it, and now we'll just come back in 4 hours. Okay, so we're back. This has been proofing for about 4 hours. We had a little bit of a problem. My husband wanted to use the toaster, so he moved the dough to the oven, and then I turned the oven on to cook some potatoes. So I noticed once the oven was about at 300 degrees, so you can see these dry spots here. That's not great. My general rule is that if all the ingredients are already mixed in, I continue to work with the dough until it becomes completely unworkable. So I'm gonna keep going with this, see how it goes, because at this point it's just my time. All the ingredients are already in and I just really don't like wasting food. So I'm gonna keep going. We'll see how it goes, that's life. This is a quick step. You can do, I'm literally on a Zoom call right now, so you can do it, while doing other things. First thing, spray down your work surface because the dough is very sticky. Then you're going to scrape out your dough, trying to keep those little bubbles that were made in there. You don't want to deflate your dough too much. And then I have here a banneton. You don't need a banneton. You can just keep this rising on a baking sheet or whatever you have. It's totally fine. Once you shape it, it will still be a ball, just maybe be a little flatter. So this is just a banneton. You're gonna put some rice flour on it to keep the dough from sticking. I definitely recommend rice flour. I've tried this with wheat flour. It doesn't work as well. It still sticks. This is my first time actually using the rice flour, so we'll see how this goes in comparison. Hopefully we have a little bit more success this time. All right, now we're going to shape our loaf. So I usually get my hands either a little wet or get some flour on them. And to shape, you're going to pull at the edges, keeping them from breaking, and just folding them in to create a nice tight little ball. So once we have our ball, I usually flip them over so that the seam side is down, and then I shape them into a nice little circle. From here, seam side's gonna face up on here because when we put it in the oven, we'll flip it onto a surface, so then seam side will be down. So for the second rise, which if you also want to flour your dough scraper, flip it in and over. All right, I'm gonna position it in my banneton. And same thing with this as with before, you want to cover it with something damp to keep the loaf from drying out. So we'll just leave this for 90 minutes on the counter and then we'll be ready to bake. One thing is, depending on how you're gonna bake, if you're gonna bake on a baking sheet, then you can just leave it for this step for 90 minutes. If you want to bake in a what's it called? If you wanna bake in one of these, then you need to put this in the oven an hour before you're going to bake. So I'm going to do that actually right now, just because I like the longer that it heats up, the better the moisture on the inside, and I like a nice crispy crust. You don't have to have one of these, but if you do, go ahead and preheat it for at least an hour in the oven. Just be really careful because it's hot, and you want to minimize the amount of time that you have the lid open because you want to keep all that moisture in. So the first thing that we're going to do is sprinkle with some just all-purpose flour so that the bottom doesn't stick. All right, now we're going to take a look at our loaf, which did rise, which is great. It means that we didn't nuke the yeast while I had it in the oven earlier on accident. All right, so now this is kind of the dicey part. Never looks very good, but we do it as quickly as possible. We're going to flip into our cast iron and go for it. There we go, except for that I missed. But other than that, not bad. All right, so we're gonna have a little bit of a lopsidey, probably. I wonder if I should. It'll be lopsided. That's fine. Alright, and then we put it in the oven for 25 to 30 minutes. So I'm gonna do 25 minutes with the lid on and 5 minutes with the lid off to brown everything. That's it. Alright, there he is. So cute. All right, and 5 minutes. So that it cools nicely. So basically with the cast iron, you just get that harder shell, which I really like the crunch for a sourdough, but you don't have to. You can just do it on a baking sheet. It will just be less crispy. There you have it. That's the way to make the easiest sourdough bread. I will eat it.
I mean, it's perfectly shaped, like it's circle. Like even if you throw it on the side, like it turned out to be good.
The goal of this is gonna be like, you can really mess things up and they can still taste good.
Yeah.
That's the goal of this video vlog. All right, so come back next time for our next recipe. Bye.